All right. Well, Lemona, it's such a privilege to be here with you today. And so I'll take just a minute to introduce why we're doing this interview now. And this is in the context of the Generation Equality Forum, which is kicking off this week. It's actually running tomorrow, the 30th of June through Friday, the 2nd of July. And the Generation Equality Forum is launched by UN Women and numerous international and intergovernmental partners, as well as stakeholders from all over the world. And it was launched at the Commission on the Status of Women last year in 2020, and it was a celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Women. And it was really a global stock taking to say, what is the progress that we've made for gender equality, and where do we still need to make progress, and how can we accelerate that progress toward gender equality? And so out of that have come 6 action coalitions and 6 blueprints for progress on gender equality. And Landesa has been one of the actors within the land sector working on getting strong language on women's land rights into 2 of those blueprints. So the Feminist Action for Climate Justice blueprint and the Economic Justice and Rights blueprint. We've been working with a number of partners in the land sector, including the International Land Coalition and Wairu Commission, who have been leading on the process of developing those blueprints. And we've been invited by UN Women to submit a commitment on women's land rights that will be announced at the Paris Forum at the end of this week on Friday, July 2nd. And so there's incredible momentum around women's land rights at this forum. There's been a lot of recognition that women's land rights really undergirds gender equality, really undergirds addressing the climate emergency, really undergirds women's rights to economic equality, really undergirds women's rights to livelihoods and to a right to adequate housing, rights to be free from gender-based violence, to the rights that are enshrined in the other action coalitions, rights to leadership and equal political participation, for example. And so we're really excited to have this commitment featured. We're really excited that there's incredible momentum around women's land rights. But this is just the beginning of the work that will come after that. So this commitment features a bold commitment to secure rights to land for rural women and girls, for Indigenous peoples, for youth, so to secure tenure rights for 100 million women and girls in rural areas. And so part of why I wanted to talk to you is that I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last few months and just gotten to know your incredible passion for women and girls and for women's land rights in Bangladesh specifically. And so wanted to talk to you about your story and about your leadership on women's land rights in Bangladesh. And so wanted to start off with just asking you to share a little bit about that passion and talk to us in the context of the Generation Equality Forum about, what is your passion for women's land rights, and where does that passion come from?
So my personal journey started because I was born in a Hindu family, which makes me a religious minority in Bangladesh. And being a being a female child in a Hindu family doesn't doesn't give me property and inheritance rights from my father or even from my husband. Now, if we look at the majority population, people who belong to the Islamic faith, they have some kind of property right. They have some sort of entitlement. But Hindu women and minority women in general in Bangladesh do not have that right at all. So when we say minority women in Bangladesh, who do I refer to? Any religious and ethnic minority women come under the umbrella of minority women, and their property rights are regulated by archaic British law, which influenced the Hindu property rights, which has never been reformed. If we look at our neighboring country, India, they have reformed their law. So any child in an Indian family is entitled to property and inheritance from the family. And belonging to the same religion in Bangladesh, women don't have that right. There are interconnected issues as well. For instance, Hindu women legally do not have the right to divorce their husbands if they're stuck in an abusive relationship. Hindu marriages are not mandatory to be registered in the country. And from a Hindu law perspective in Bangladesh, polygamy is not illegal. So, how does that impact women? I am the privileged minority of the country. I have had the privilege of having an education. I'm able to work and support myself. But the women that I'm standing up for, they belong to the marginalized groups. They are the ones who come secondary to the male child. So when they're stuck in a situation where they're abused by their husbands, they do not receive any inheritance or property from their father or their husbands. They end up in a situation where they have no recourse or redress. They cannot seek legal help simply because legally it doesn't exist. So I would not say that the government did not try to take initiatives, but there was hesitation from the Hindu community to reform that archaic law. The community still did. I don't know for what good reason they did not want to reform that law. So that's where I started questioning, and my personal experiences and everything that I have seen, growing up in that country, sort of pushed me to advocate rights of these women. And when I explored in depth into this issue, I saw that there are interconnected issues, and it's not only limited to Hindu women; it's affecting indigenous women as well. And there is a good proportion of indigenous community in Bangladesh. So that's where my journey started. And so I launched a campaign called She Owns, which advocates for property and inheritance rights of women in Bangladesh, property and inheritance rights of minority women in Bangladesh. And the purpose of this campaign is firstly to reform the law and to provide minority women with equal property and inheritance rights from a constitutional perspective. And the second is to raise awareness because there are numerous human rights activists in the country working on various issues. But I have in my life never seen even one single human rights activist who comes from my religious community standing up, becoming a role model, and saying, I would like this right for myself. So I am taking up that position and I'm trying to fill up that vacuum and be a role model for all these women who are so sometimes blinded by emotions or love for their family, for their father, or for their husbands, and they never speak up. Or maybe because they just don't see how they can demand their right. So I am trying to raise awareness at the grassroots level so that we get the law reformed and we get more and more women speaking about it and more women demanding their right to property and inheritance.
Incredibly powerful. Yeah. So I think what is so inspiring to me about your work is just, advocating for women to recognize and advocate for their own agency and for equal standing with men and to work to reform laws to make those laws equitable so that women can access those rights. So tell us a little bit more about She Owns. Tell us about the work that you've been doing in Chittagong with these communities and the work that you see in front of you. So I'm curious about the opportunities that you see for women and girls in Bangladesh. What's the vision that you see for transforming the legal framework and for what could be for women's land rights in Bangladesh?
So a few years back, there was a proposed bill in the Bangladeshi parliament that the government introduced, where the intention was to provide property and inheritance rights to minority women in the country, which, as I mentioned, did not pass, and there was hesitation from the minority community. So the purpose of She Owns, what I do is I focus on specific pockets of communities in Bangladesh. For instance, if we look at the indigenous population, there are several sub-ethnic groups there, so they're impacted differently, yet the issue is the same. So what I do is I highlight the overall land rights issue there, because there's land grabbing. It's quite common in the Chittagong Hill Tracts. So what I do is I focus on the land rights issue, and then from there I derive and I try to sort of highlight how that issue would ultimately impact women. Vandalizing temples and other people's properties, specifically of ethnic minorities, is quite common in Bangladesh. We're quite used to that kind of news in the media. And at some point, we get so used to it that we stop reacting. So what I do with my campaign is to just reiterate the problem and keep keep uh, keep mentioning the fact how it's impacting women and how powerless women are becoming in the process. So what is the solution? We give property rights to these marginalized groups. That's what some of the major organizations in the country are working towards. But the point that I'm trying to make through my campaign is the fact that even if we give property rights to these marginalized groups, that doesn't save women and the vulnerable children that are associated as well, because we're looking at girl child as well. So when a group is given the power or they have the right to property, that still benefits the men of the community, not the women. So that still doesn't solve the problem. So I have introduced a bill where I have, sorry, not a bill, sort of like um, a letter that writing to the Ministry of Justice, where I have advocated and I have sought for support from different supporters, asking to 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 vouch for this campaign so that women have uh, property and inheritance rights in Bangladesh. That is just one aspect of addressing the issue. The other is the other aspect of the campaign is that I mentor girls in Chittagong Hill Tracks, and I mentor girls of various marginalized backgrounds. And while I do that, through leadership programs, I try to raise awareness of this issue. And while I'm trying to provide them develop leadership skills through those workshops, I try to prepare them so that they can become spokesperson and they become aware that this is their right. They can speak about it and they should.
A lot of work. So tell us what is it? What's the next step for you? How could Landesa and other groups come around you? What is it that you need in Bangladesh, and what is it that She Owns needs to take this incredible work that you're doing to the next level?
So you mentioned about the momentum, and I would like to use this momentum to sort of create a ripple effect in the country. I'm just one individual working, and with if we use this momentum and if I have the support of Landesa as an organization, I think the impact that I will be able to create will be much, much bigger than what I'm doing now. And some of the organizations working in this issue are working in silos. So one of my aim is to bring all the organizations together and take collective action. Second would be to raise much more awareness of what I'm doing now compared to what I'm doing now. The second aim would be to raise awareness at the grassroots level and to have more women join me and demand for their property and inheritance rights from the government. If women make that noise, then that will be much more powerful, and it will not matter, at least to some extent, what the men in the community are saying about those rights. Because if the victims speak up, if they demand for their rights, then that's what the government will take into consideration. And the third would be to collectively vouch for reform of that archaic law, which the government has acknowledged. And there has been one or two cases where there has been favorable decisions. But even if you ask, let's say, a widow in a village in Bangladesh, are you aware of the decision? Do you know that you can rely on this decision of the High Court and get some kind of financial sponsorship from your husband's family? The answer will be no. I have spoken to my own family members who are widows and who are financially vulnerable, and they were not aware. So, and then the second other aspect is the fact that to get a favorable decision, uh, a woman in the country will have to go through the entire legal process, which is, I mean, that's just shouldn't be the case. So the three things I would suggest is to take collective action. One, to raise awareness at the grassroots level and get more women speaking and standing up for their rights and join my movement. And third would be to actively seek to reform the archaic law that exists in the country.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much both for laying that out so clearly and for joining us in this conversation. And we will look forward to continuing the conversation and looking for ways to join you in that collective action and in raising awareness and then looking for ways to help support that
Thank
reform.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you, Beth.
And we'll look forward to sharing your story around the Generation Equality Forum, and look forward to joining you in carrying this momentum for women's rights forward. Thanks so much, Lemona.